Michigan got its quarterback in the transfer portal. Certainly, it's not the name that a lot of you wanted, but I'm going to tell you that he might not be the hero that Michigan needs, but it is the hero that Michigan deserves. Actually, Mikey Keene was my personal choice out of the three that people were bandying about on. Let's get into why here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And Michigan ends up landing Mikey Keene from Fresno State via UCF. I think there's a lot to like about him. I understand why there's some fan consternation, but some of the things that are being said about Mikey Keene are just so far off, it's unbelievable. People are saying that he actually makes the Michigan. I've actually gotten people saying in my Twitter that he's worse than what Michigan already has. That's just inaccurate, okay? That's just inaccurate. I've seen the message board banter. A lot of it is inaccurate. You were trying to turn him into something he's not for the sake of just saying, okay, he's not what I want. It's absolutely absurd. And I'm here to educate you a little bit. And I want to pull up one thing here. I like how auto finish sometimes doesn't finish. You click on it and it's like, oh, did you want this? Yes. And then it doesn't give it to you. So Mikey Keene is 5'11", 200 pounds. The 24/7 Sports Transfer Portal rankings has him about 400 overall at 398. But you look at On3, they have him at like 112. So, relatively higher than I think Billy Edwards was. But here's the thing. Mikey Keene has thrown for more than any quarterback currently on the roster has. He's got 4 years of experience. 2021, 2022, he redshirted at UCF. Well, that's where he had some carryover with Chip Lindsey. He already knows Chip Lindsey's system. That's one of the things that works for Mikey Keene. He did start his freshman year several games at UCF. This is prior to Chip Lindsey taking over. It was kind of unbalanced, but he completed 63.6% of his passes, 17 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 1,700 yards on the season. Had 2 games he didn't play in, barely played in week 2, but then otherwise kind of took over. Not really much to write home about, but consistently was passing for in the 150s, which is kind of what you saw from Davis Warren. 2022, he only played in 4 games, but it was not too much different in terms of production. Threw a little bit better, 72.3% passing, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, 647 yards in 4 games. Nothing much to write home about. Best game came against Memphis, where he threw 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 219 yards in that game, almost 80% completion percentage. Had a really bad game against Navy that year, but otherwise that was it. 2023 is where he kind of started to turn on the Jets. If you remember, week 1 against Purdue, he goes to Purdue and beats Purdue. Went 31 for 44, 70.5% completion percentage, 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. He, since starting there, had multiple 300-plus yard games. Purdue, Kent State, just shy against Boise State with 290 yards in a win against Boise State last year, 380 against New Mexico State. Now, I understand those aren't like huge names that he played against or anything. That year, Purdue was their biggest. Purdue and Boise State were their 2 biggest opponents on the season. But he had 1 bad game against New Mexico, a loss against New Mexico, but otherwise and not too great against San Jose State, but consistently eclipsed 200 yards and often got to 3. This past year, you obviously saw him play against Michigan. And yes, he had the pick 6. I see people say he threw the pick 6. You have to understand, Will Johnson was absolutely baiting him into that. And he took the bait. Will Johnson is who Will Johnson was for a reason. You can't just say Will Johnson does Will Johnson things and then also say the quarterback sucks. It's one or the other in this particular instance. He got baited into something. We've seen Will Johnson do that. He did the same thing with Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord is a pretty good quarterback, as you can see this year. He had 235 yards against Michigan, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, but still completed just over 60%. I mean, he burned Michigan often in that game. Had 316 yards in a loss to UNLV. They just couldn't get to the end zone. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And had another 300-yard game this year against Sacramento State. I know that's not much writing home about. Someone on my Twitter said he was terrible against Washington State. He did throw 2 interceptions. Washington State is an upgrade in competition. You have to keep that in mind. Fresno State is not on the same plane. Washington State was pretty good this year. 24 for 36, 67%, 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions against Washington State. That is a stat line that most of you would have taken. Okay, that's part of it. So here's the other part. Honorable mention 2 times in the Mountain West. An honorable mention All-American, that is. So I mean that says something. But Michigan, what they really needed was they need that 1-year bridge, and that's kind of the difficulty. As we've discussed earlier I should say last week, Michigan wasn't necessarily going to be able to be in the sweepstakes for a Fernando Mendoza with multiple years. Wasn't going to be able to be in the sweepstakes with a John Mateer with a do not contact tag and multiple years of eligibility. There was just certain guys that they were going to be precluded from. Guys that are going to come here and they also understand it's like, hey, you've got 1 year. This is your 1 year to try to make it into the NFL. Also, we have Bryce Underwood. Yeah. Also, we have a Hulk. So that's a hard sell. But the fact that he's got the familiarity already with Chip Lindsey's offense, the fact that he's got multiple years as a starter, he's had more good games than bad. Often you look at some of these scores, some of them were like, yeah, they weren't able to get in the end zone a lot, but also you look at like the UNLV game, they allowed 59 points to UNLV. That you're not going to win a game very easily that way if your defense is just kind of giving up everything. But is a guy who's a gamer? Yeah, he's not the tallest guy in the world, but it's kind of like people would have been fine if it was like, yeah, Miller Moss. They're getting Miller Moss. He's kind of Miller Lite Moss, okay, in a lot of ways. Kind of a similar quarterback. I understand there's a lot of people that want to see a guy who is a dual threat. I think it's fine to have that change of pace and have the guy that is going to be a little bit more of a pocket passer. I think that's fine for now because you can bring in Bryce Underwood who can do both. I'm assuming you're going to see that one way or the other. There's a very large chance that you see Bryce Underwood starting down the line, like week 5, week 6, something like that. I mean, it could be week 1. That's the thing is you're just trying to raise the floor of this room. And that way you're not necessarily throwing Bryce to the wolves. You're starting to play Bryce the moment he's grasped the playbook, understands how to read defenses. Because Bryce still was throwing interceptions at the high school level. It's not like there's a bunch of stuff going on in the high school level that rivals what he's going to see in the college level. So it's smart to bring him along. And Mikey Keene at least has had some opportunity. Yeah, threw way too many interceptions, had multiple multi-interception games. Had 4 this past year as he threw 11 interceptions. It's not great. 18 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, though. That's still better than what Michigan's throwing out there this year. So that's already an improvement. And you still have Davis Warren, who can certainly grow and be better than he was this year because now he's got experience. He knows what it's like, to beat Ohio State, all of that kind of stuff. So we are going to continue on because I have some more ammunition for the Mikey Keene defenders here to kind of help, or those who just are detractors, to help you understand where he stands. It's better than you think. I'm telling you this. We're going to get to the advanced analytics here in just a moment. But before we do, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, or ones that I just didn't want anymore. And Rocket Money made it so much easier for me to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant in your finances. Part of it also is they let me know any fraud. I get an email all the time. I got an email today after I sent to Venmo, just because we don't recognize this. We want to categorize it. They keep track of your money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has even saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. Like I said, it really helps a lot, and it just keeps track of everything financially. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, let's continue on. I went into PFF to see where Mikey Keene rated as a passer. Initially, I did this, using the minimum dropbacks, and then I decided against it. Now, I started 2022, even though 2021 was his freshman year. I decided to just let's start at the Chimp Lindsay and move forward. A lot of times you can't glean a lot from a freshman year, but in 2022, with all quarterbacks in the entire country listed, no minimum dropbacks. Keep in mind, PFF is grading, right? This is advanced analytics looking backwards. It's not like when you're looking at SP Plus for teams and you're looking at a predictive model. This is a backwards looking model. Mikey Keene in 2022 wasn't the starter, played in 4 games, but was the 34th ranked quarterback on PFF. That is ahead of players such as his former teammate Dylan Gabriel, Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels. Actually, at that time, he was a first-year Oregon starting quarterback, Bo Nix. Jaden Daniels in his first year at LSU. Max Duggan as he was balling out for TCU. He's ahead of number 63, your very own J.J. McCarthy. Yes, much bigger sample size, but he was ahead of J.J. McCarthy. He was ahead of Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. Ahead of Baylor quarterback Jerry Bohannon, who that year was he at Baylor that year? I don't know. I wrote him down. I think, regardless, Jerry Bohannon had a very good 2022. He was ahead of Will Howard, who was at Kansas State at the time. He was ahead of Will Rogers at Mississippi State at the time. He was ahead of Drew Aller in Aller's that was his freshman year, but he was ahead of him. Former 5-star. So that's 2022 in his 4 games. Starts in 2023 for Fresno State after transferring, plays in, I think, all of the games, or maybe he missed one. I don't remember. He was at 53. He was ahead of Daquan Finn, who was still at Toledo at that time, had a full year going for him. And Finn's not going to be in my 2024. He only had three games. He was ahead of Cam Ward, who was the new hotness when it came to getting a transfer quarterback. So he was ahead of Cam Ward. He was ahead of Kyle McCord with his year at Ohio State. He was ahead of Michael Pratt at Tulane, who was one of those guys that everyone was saying he could come in and be the next quarterback. He was ahead of Diego Pavia. He was ahead of a good season DJU. Remember, his year at Oregon State. It was like a resurrection of his career. It was bad at Clemson, good at Oregon State, terrible at Florida State. But DJU had a much better year last year at Oregon State. He was ahead of DJU. He was ahead of Alan Bowman, former Michigan quarterback who was tossing all over the yard. He was ahead of a freshman, Nico Iamaleava. He was ahead of Will Howard in his final year at Kansas State. He was ahead of Fernando Mendoza at Cal. He was ahead of Riley Leonard, who was then at Duke, got injured halfway through the season, but was another quarterback that people thought maybe Michigan could go get him. He was ahead of Cade Klubnik. He was ahead of Jaden Mayava. And he was just behind by 2 spots, just behind college football playoff quarterback Jalen Milroe by two spots, okay? So that's where he was. This year, 2024, he ranked 1 ahead of where he did last year, 52nd. That's ahead of Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, ahead of Miller Moss, name that everybody wanted, ahead of Caden Salter. Keep in mind, he started the whole season. This isn't like, it was a limited sample size for these guys. Nope, full season. Ahead of Miller Moss, ahead of Caden Salter from Liberty, ahead of Darian Mensah. Those are 3 players I just mentioned that Michigan wanted. Right? Or maybe not that Michigan wanted, that Michigan fans wanted to potentially come and be the transfer quarterback. Ahead of Riley Leonard with Notre Dame. Ahead of Fernando Mendoza, who certainly everyone would have taken with a smile. Ahead of Billy Edwards, who was certainly one of those guys. I mean, not one of those guys. He was the one we all thought was coming at one point. Ahead of Malik Murphy. Ahead of Thomas Castellanos, ahead of Arizona quarterback Noah Fafita, ahead of true freshman phenom Dylan Raiola. You're going to love this one. Ahead of John Mateer, Washington State, the top player in the transfer portal, according to production and grades. Ahead of Washington's Will Rogers, ahead of Davis Warren, who was number 176. Remember, here you have Keene at 52, Davis Warren's 156, and ahead of Aiden Childs at MSU, who I think a lot of people would have gladly taken regardless of anything. Again, just behind Milroe. He was just within 10 spots. He was behind Jalen Milroe, Arch Manning, Carson Beck, and Diego Pavia. Like, that's pretty good company to keep right there. Okay, like, he's in that range. So next, Michigan's got to try to find some receivers and figure that out. I don't have any answers as far as that is concerned as of yet as to where they stand. Deuce Robinson ended up committing to Florida State after all. I mean, I told you it was a low likelihood that he was going to end up in Ann Arbor. We'll see about Zachariah Branch, but that does not feel like he's visited Georgia and Arizona State. Obviously, the Zion Branch thing, I think, precludes them a little bit, probably the price tag as well. We'll see who they're going to get. Omega Blake, the guy that I really wanted from Charlotte, he's going to, I just saw, I think, Arkansas, most likely. Wait. Yep, Arkansas. He's going most likely to Arkansas. So, I mean, they still got to find receivers, so they need to have guys for him to throw to. But things are kind of, I think, better than a lot of people are willing to say. Like, when you look at the quarterbacks that you wanted, a lot of you wanted, whether you're looking at your plan A, like a Miller Moss or a Caden Salter, or you're looking at a plan B, like Billy Edwards, or you're looking at a plan C, whoever that might be, like a Daquan Finn, he ranks ahead of them in terms of his actual production. He's a very accurate passer. You got to cut down on the picks, right? But obviously, too, this is just, I'm not saying that he's got a limited job here, but you do have to remember Michigan has Bryce Underwood. And the fact that they got a guy, because that's one of the things after talking to someone close to the situation, it's a difficult thing to get a guy to say, hey, I'm going to come for my final year and also understand that Bryce Underwood's waiting in the wings. Like, that's a difficult proposition. And they purposely looked at Mikey Keene. They were selective. They liked him better overall than Daquan Finn. You might not have, but Michigan did, and that's what counts, okay? Sometimes fans don't always get what they want, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes fans get what they want, and it's not good. It reminds me a lot of watching Detroit Lions in the NFL draft for years. They would go and get all these players. I'm like, I can't believe they just got Roy Williams and Kevin Jones in the same class. Like, beat that, right? It seemed like whenever the Lions were getting the player that I wanted, it was an absolute disaster. When they got players that I didn't want, like a Gosder Sherrillis, then usually it was like, this ends up actually being really great. That's how it's tended to go. I think sometimes they can be the same, right? You see the squirrel, you see the sparkly thing, and you want it, and it is, what it is, but it doesn't always work out for your benefit. I think this is a great move for Michigan. Like I said, he was the one out of him, Finn, and Lewis from Nevada. He was the one that I wanted the most, and I didn't think you could go super wrong with any of the three, but it went in the order of. Now I say that Lewis actually ranks ahead this past year of Mikey Keene, but I went more of the Keene, Finn, and then Lewis. That's kind of how I looked at it. So we'll see how it goes. And like I said, this is just raises the roof of the room. You lose Alex Orji, Jaden Denegal, and Jack Tuttle, but you do gain Bryce Underwood, Chase Herbstreit, and Mikey Keene. I mean, the room is better. It just is. All right, I want to talk a little bit more transfer portal stuff, just a little bit of inside intel things. Not necessarily particularly like meaty, but nonetheless. All right, we'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's absolutely thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Michigan's just wrapped up its recruiting weekend in terms of the transfer portal. Now they're in a dead period. Obviously, guys can commit. No more visits, though. That's it. But they just finished out with a big weekend with a bunch of guys. Skylar Bell from UConn. He just visited. He's a wide receiver. Fa'amo Fa'alili. Or no, Fa'alili Fa'amo. There we go. He brought the Washington State offensive tackle. He just visited as well. And I'm missing one before I say Justice Haynes, but Justice Haynes as well. Big weekend for Michigan in terms of that. Obviously, they just came out with a commitment from Troy Bowles, the former four-star linebacker from Georgia. Hadn't really seen time because Georgia recruits linebackers like insanely. I think that really helps out the room really, really well, regardless if he starts playing immediately or not. But really, obviously, all eyes around Justice Haynes. Took a multi-day visit. That's huge news for Michigan. Not many people are giving Michigan much credit. You look at Pete Nakos. He's got him going to South Carolina. I guess. I don't know. Position of need for Michigan in terms of how they see it. They say we absolutely need him. And I do know from talking to someone that they feel like the visit went about as good as it could. And he would be the best guy that they would get in the portal regardless of position. So I think that's encouraging news to know that, like, hey, they really like where they stand. Feels like they've got a little bit more work to do, but wouldn't surprise me if this ended relatively quickly. But obviously, it is transfer portal recruiting. It's different than regular recruiting. Just because I am confident now doesn't mean like in an hour from now he doesn't just suddenly like commit to Texas A&M, right? That's just the nature of it. Until he's signed, anything can happen. We even learned that with Damon Payne that even he can sign and something else could happen, right? So I feel really good about where they stand there. I think that they'll close out with a few more guys. I do want to take a quick look at my article that I had of 10 guys, and we can kind of assess where they stand again real fast. So Zachariah Branch, I had him as low probability, staying at low probability. Washington State defensive tackle David Gusta. We'll see. Didn't visit. Won't be able to visit until after January 1st. Depends on how people perceive. Now, you're going to see some more transfer portal guys entering the transfer portal. You're seeing that from Tennessee today. As teams get eliminated from the college football playoff, they're going to end up in the portal. So they still, I think, will get one high-end defensive tackle. Michigan it's going to be a destination given what people have seen from Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, okay? Troy Bowles ended up committing. Emmanuel Carnley is the one I was thinking about. Feels like that's going to... I heard, I think, on On3 that he's making a Christmas Day decision. I feel good about that. I didn't get any intel necessarily about that, but I feel good about him entering the fold. I'm mad at him for making me have to do some work on Christmas Day outside of maybe the podcast, but c'est la vie. Deuce Robinson off the board. Max Clare, that feels like it's a Michigan-Louisville battle. Ohio State is looming. I'd be more leery of Ohio State if like they knew how to use tight ends. I understand Chip Kelly can pitch Zach Ertz and all of that. I just don't think that you see G. Scott and say like, yeah, that's what I want to be. I think you look at Colston Loveland and say that's what I want to be, or you just go back to Jeff Brown. I think that makes a heck of a lot more sense. Northwestern guard Josh Thompson, who knows where that stands at this point? I know Michigan feels good, but he hasn't made a decision yet. Battling the SEC. Mentioned Mikey Keene. He's in the fold. Fa'alili Fa'amo feels like that went good. And the probability for him to end up here is high, but we'll see. And then obviously Justice Haynes, who I'd be about an inch shy from putting in a crystal ball prediction if I hadn't already put one already mentally back in November. So I still think he's going to end up at Michigan, but still feels like maybe there's just a little bit more work to do. We'll see how that transpires, but feel good about all of that. Last thing, let's talk about the playoff real quick. All 4 games blowouts. Who could have seen that coming? I thought at least Tennessee was going to put up more of a fight, but just idiotic ridiculousness from Josh Heupel to think like that he could play Ohio State straight up the way that they did. instead of kind of taking a page out of what Michigan did. That said, is there anyone more unlikable than Jack Sawyer? It's like he's like the inverse of Travion Henderson, who I absolutely adore as a human and still have contact with. But Jack Sawyer is still out there taunting and was like looking like completely oblivious. It's like if they would have lost, then Tennessee would have come out and planted the flag and he would have been the same reaction. And it'd be like, oh, if it couldn't just be the consequences of my actions. But this is the thing. I don't really care. About like Ohio State still got to get through multiple more games. No, you don't want to see them win a national championship. I'm still kind of surprised that people think that have them ahead of Oregon. I still think Oregon's a more complete team. I thought Oregon far outperformed the score against Ohio State. But we'll see. They play games for a reason. It's hard to beat the same team twice. And certainly they could have a different, either team could have a different game plan and it could be incredibly effective or not. So it will be interesting to see. But it is kind of funny to see, like in the retrospect, it's like I felt Clemson was going to be very meh, and they were exactly that. SMU against Penn State went about as I expected. Indiana against Notre Dame went about as I expected. I say all this because it's kind of like, okay, what I would prefer I still liked the 4 teams. I thought it was great. It was exclusive. There was very little controversy outside of Florida State. Generally, like I just thought that went better. It kind of sucks for teams like Tennessee, or, SMU or Indiana. Honestly, I know I just named 3 of the 4, but Indiana goes to Notre Dame, and like Indiana is a team that often doesn't make bowl games. And yes, it's in the playoff, and that's great, but like they don't get their week of fun in the sun and all of the kind of things that come along with that. Their season's just done, and I guess that's a trade-off you take every time. But it's also disappointing that it's like, okay, that happened and now you don't even get to go have your week in Florida or whatever. I just like the 4. I think that was the best. I used to be a proponent of 6. I can absolutely go with 6. But I would much prefer a 4-team playoff. That's just me. Last thing, Ohio State fans, stop trying we're still in the college football playoff. We don't care about Michigan. Yeah, no, you do. And you just aren't convincing a single Michigan fan. There's not one Michigan fan that would at the moment trade places with you, right? Like you can sit there and say, well, the Michigan National Championship has an asterisk and it was forever ago and now is now. No, not one Michigan fan cares. Not one. It's stop trying to make fetch happen. It's all I see on my social media feeds. It's absolutely absurd. Congratulations, you are in the 12-team playoff. Not one Michigan fan would trade places with you right now. Every Michigan fan thinks it's hilarious that you got beat with Michigan's worst team in a decade plus. So, anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you very much. We're going to be back on Tuesday, Christmas Eve. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you then. Peace.